I am going to do my best to be as efficient as possible and respectful of your time here, but I do want to explain the issues that we are bringing to the board from the governance committee. And I'm going to be going back and forth between a couple of documents. One is, this is the agenda from 2 weeks, or almost, I guess, last week. And then I also have a copy of our bylaws, and then I have a new document that I will be sending to you, which is the minutes from the governance committee. I'll be referring to that. That shows kind of how we've amended the language. Okay, first issue is the number of trustees. So we have talked at length about this, and this has actually come up at some board meetings as well, so I don't think this is a new issue. The current bylaws have us at 12 to 17, as you can see right here, and we are thinking that this is actually too high. And then we are suggesting too high for two reasons. One, as a matter of practicality, and two, based on recommendations from the Isaacs review that the too high could actually be problematic. So we are recommending a minimum of either 7 or 9 and a maximum of either 11 or 13. Odd numbers so that when we vote, there is, we don't end up in a potential deadlock. And the governance committee is flexible on what these numbers are, and so we would like you to think about those, and that's what we're going to discuss in the next meeting. Change of these numbers then necessitates changes kind of going further, and this, I want to actually kind of go into this here. This is pretty confusing, so I'm going to go to the minutes to show kind of what we have taken out. So sorry, that's the bylaws. And bear with me. Okay, here it is. Okay, so what we've done here is we've taken out a section here that, because as you're probably thinking, this has implications for our standing committees when we drop our numbers. So we're taking out here this language that says each committee shall not have less than 3 trustee members. So that's all that is happening with this first section of the agenda there that is here, is that is gone. So next is, moving on here, this is a section of the bylaw which we need to amend when we figure out what our minimums is. And if it's either, and this will say either 7 or 9, depending on what we decide. Okay, moving on. Selection of officers. The officers are when we talk about officers, what we're referring to are what we currently have is the vice president, secretary, and treasurer. That's what we mean by officers, separate from committee chairs. It's important to have that distinction because we've got some recommendations for how we would like to change both the selection of officers and who the office, and actually the officers themselves. So let me look. I'm looking at my notes too. Okay, so the first change here, and that's here, but let me go to the minutes that we did so you can kind of see what we've changed here, is that we have taken out the word annual as to when the election of the officers is going to take place. We had a long conversation about this, and I've kind of come to the conclusion, and want your feedback on this as well, in that when we do this at the annual meeting, it seems more of a kind of a rubber stamp formality, and it would be awkward to not elect anyone at the annual meeting because of the nature of the public kind of being there. So we are proposing that we move this to a two-part election system. One where we would nominate on one meeting, and then a second meeting where we would actually elect. I want to go back to that in a second because we also would like to change the change who the officers, change the kind of the officers, so the office. So this is what's here, and this is back to our agenda. So recommend changing the office of vice president to vice president-elect and secretary, and limiting the office of secretary so that you would have then your two officers. You'd have the vice president-elect and secretary, and you would have the treasurer. So those are the two officers we're thinking about. So we need to talk about this. And the rationale for that is to the vice president-elect, you can probably guess, is we're thinking about a succession plan. And this then makes it clear that the vice president then takes over as the president. And then it seems secretary does not seem like a necessary role anymore or officer anymore, but obviously the treasurer is. So now let's go back to what we're proposing for the elections. So we're proposing that in April, we nominate as a whole board the new officers for the next year. And so anyone can nominate, and you can also self-nominate, and that takes place at April. And then in May is when we would vote on these officers. So that is the change that's kind of going on here. And then you can see kind of how the language kind of shifted here. And I'll let you kind of look further on that if you would like to do that. So that is the okay. So currently, you're probably wondering, currently in the bylaws, what does it say about that? It's not specific that I could see on kind of how these officers get elected. So currently the practice has been the president nominates, and then we elect on that. So Isaacs wanted some clarity in that, and they wanted kind of more of an election for that. So that's why we've created this. Okay, moving on, the next thing is, and we're almost done here, is the committee chairs. So currently the committee chairs are appointed by the president, and then they also serve on the executive, so the executive officers serve on the executive committee, and also committee chairs serve on the executive committee. We're not changing anything with the executive committee at this point, but we are proposing a change with the committee chairs. So down here, we are suggesting or recommending that the committees themselves will elect a chair from their members, subject to the advice and consent of the president. And so once the committees are formed, which typically takes place at the beginning of a school year, then the committees select their chairs. And that's this language here. Okay, one more thing on the March agenda, which was the process of agenda creation. And here, basically, the idea is these changes are designed to clarify how the agendas are put together and to enable board members to place items on the agenda in kind of a formal and clarified way. I did look at the bylaws to see whether we had whether agenda creation is there. I can't find it, so please correct me if I'm wrong on that. So basically, again, this just gives language describing in formal terms how anyone could put an item on the agenda. This number 2 particularly is during a board meeting you can make a motion, and then it needs a majority vote to approve it, to put something on the agenda. Okay, so that is everything. And again, thank you for your time. And you can either email questions or we can talk about them at the next board meeting. Okay, thank you. Okay, trying to close out. Screen recorder, shoot, where is it? There we go.